All right. Thanks for being here, Andy. Looking forward to learning more about you and hearing how your journey in fire progressed. So you can take it away.
Absolutely. Glad to do it. So yeah, I'm Andy Hamilton. Um, I've got a slideshow. I'll kind of run through it, hit some of the points that are on there and fill in the gaps otherwise. But so some of the titles I currently hold, husband, father. I'm an instructor at the University of Idaho for these online courses in wildland fire. I'm a fire and fuel subject matter expert. I do some consulting and some grant writing stuff based on that. I'm an instructor at the Arizona Wildfire Incident Management Academy in Prescott, Arizona, teaching fire behavior courses. And then stuff that are non-fire related. I'm also a real estate agent and investor in Tucson, Arizona, where I live. And I put INTJ, it's Myers-Briggs, sort of like personality, um, oh, uh, four-letter indicator that tells you uh, how to kind of predict how you'll sort of like interact with the world and other people. Um, I have maybe that makes sense to you. Maybe it doesn't. You can Google it later if you want and do the test by yourself. Um, but I have found that it told me a lot of. I learned that in fire one year during a critical training, and it told me a lot about myself and has helped me along the way to sort of understand why I make certain decisions that I make and why, if I know other people's four-letter indicator, it helps me understand decisions that they make that I wouldn't necessarily have made. So I threw it in there. So qualifications and education. I have a bachelor's from the University of Arizona in global and intercultural studies. It's a interdisciplinary studies degree. You'll find a theme throughout my professional life and personal life is interdisciplinary things. I have a hard time just specializing in one thing. I often find having a perspective from a totally different side really informs something else that I'm doing professionally or personally. I just like having a big picture. So um, my qualifications on the fire line, I'm an IC4, a crew boss, engine boss, firing boss, FEMO, a JSS trainee. Um, I've held other quals along the way that I have let go. Um, and then my interests are, varied. I like geography. I like understanding how people interact with the land um, and sort of like systems. I like to cook. I'm interested in real estate, music, traveling, camping, hiking, and now I do most of those things with my family. I've got a daughter who's 4 years old. We'll go to the next slide here. So these are just some pictures. The start of my journey. The one on the far left there, I rappelled into a fire on some steep country in Idaho. The middle one's the first hotshot crew I was ever on, and the one on the right, I was on a fire module, and we were doing some work at the Grand Canyon. And we'll bump to the next one here. And so, as you go through these, the whole point of this, right, is to figure out how people got to where they got, what their path was. Some are very intentional, some are not. I would say mine is very very much not until a certain point, and then it is again. And there's stuff on here where these are sort of the highlights, but there was a lot of stuff kind of going on in the back burner that fills in the cracks and all these things. And so um, when I right out of high school, I went to college, and that's not on here, but I think that gives some good context. I didn't know I didn't even know what a wildland firefighter was. Um, I didn't really spend a lot of time outside. We were, family from Tucson, Arizona, and we went car camping every once in a while. And um, uh, I went to college and studied a totally unrelated subject, stuff that was interesting to me, but had nothing to do with wildland fire fuels or ecology. And I just found that I didn't really excel in a classroom setting. It was hard for me. Um, I ended up getting a job at a retail, like a clothing store, and I just discovered that I really liked to work. It made a lot of sense to me in a way that school didn't, and so that eventually led me to joining a conservation corps. I did trail work for 2 years and really, loved that. I learned how to live outside and eat outside and sleep outside, and I really enjoyed the work. I loved being, out in national forest and national park, but I learned that I really enjoyed um, building trail or rerouting trail, and being able to look backwards and see what I had completed was very fulfilling. Um, to have that sort of evidence that that was something I had done, and I also liked the design aspect of it, and I really liked something that stuck with me for a long time was the idea that um, you can create a system that um, for the user seems obvious, but for you, the creator, was very intentional. And so keeping people on the trail, like that's the first time I sort of discovered that concept, and it was really interesting to me, and I used it a lot in my career. Um, so when I was on the trail crew, I got free fire training. There was a hot shot on a crew that no longer exists up in Pleasant Valley, in Young, Arizona, the Pleasant Valley Hot Shots. And this is a guy who had, 20 years earlier gotten his start on a conservation crew, and was trying to pay that forward. So I got free training. Um, Sort of serendipitously, I also, I had been invited on a river rafting trip through the Grand Canyon. Was about to leave, and I got a call from a hotshot soup. This is back before USA Jobs, and he said, "Do you want a spot on this crew?" I said, "Well, I'm going on this rafting trip," and he said, "Well, if you're going on the rafting trip, you don't have a job." So I just, had really didn't know what I was getting myself into. I stepped up and took the job, and the rest is sort of history. So again, it wasn't super intentional. I just knew I had an opportunity and I didn't pass it up. I took it. So I worked on that crew for a couple of seasons, 3 seasons, and I kind of was in college in the off season and fighting fire in the summer. I did that for 3 seasons, and then I took a year off. I lived in China for a while, um, and then I uh, lived in Spearfish, South Dakota, and just worked at a restaurant. And I even early on understood that although I really loved fire, um, in a lot of ways, it didn't provide a balanced life. And so I took a season off, and the next year I decided, that also hadn't provided the kind of balance. I missed fire. I wanted to get back into it, and I got a job on a rappel crew in Salmon, Idaho. You can see in these slides sort of the qualifications that I worked on as I went through these various stages. I rappelled for a season, um, and I enjoyed it. I intended to stay there for a while, and then during the off season, um, I got a call from. I didn't even realize that I had applied for a job on USA Jobs for a wildland fire module. I must have done it in sort of a mass application situation. In my hometown of Tucson, Arizona, Saguaro National Park, I got a call and they said, "Would you like a job on this fire module?" And I had never even considered that I'd be able to live in my hometown and be a wildland firefighter. I didn't even know what a fire module was at that point. But again, a door opened and I went through it, and it turned out that I finally found sort of the thing that really turned me on in fire, and that was thinking about fuels and learning about ecology and really studying how fire behaves. And I did that for 3 seasons. At this point, I'm still a seasonal. I enjoyed another thing I enjoyed about wildland fire was the lifestyle provided. I could work really hard for 6 months, 7 months, and then be off and travel and indulge completely in the other interests that I had. So um, I did that for a few seasons, and it was time to get a permanent job. Um, I wanted to get a permanent job, and so I got a call from Crater Lake National Park and got um, a job on a Type 6 engine. Did that for a season. Again, I walked through a door that opened, and although I enjoyed it, I learned a lot. It wasn't really what I loved about fire. It wasn't the right fit for me. And that summer, or that off season, I applied for a lot of jobs again, just kind of um, to see what was out there. And I got a call. One of the first squad bosses I'd ever had on the hotshot crew that I was on was now a superintendent on a hotshot crew in Silver City, and he needed a squad leader. And he remembered me from this had been almost 10 years before at that point. And I got hired. I went to Silver City, and sort of the lesson at this part in the path is don't burn bridges, and um, keep your circle intact. It can serve you well as you go through your career. I did that for a year and a half, and then um, a job on that same module the Saguaro module that I'd been on as a seasonal, a permanent job opened up, and it was a permanent way for me to be in Tucson, in my hometown, and be close to my mom and dad, and they were getting a little bit older, and I took it. I came back, worked on some more qualifications. Um, I honestly I thought I'd work there and retire from there. Things didn't work out that way, um, and I ended up getting a job that hadn't existed. Came into being. I applied for it and got a fuels tech position with the Forest Service in the Coronado National Forest. Um, and did that for a couple of years, and then another job that didn't exist came into being, and that was the data manager for the Coronado National Forest. I applied for it and I got it, um, and I did that for a couple of years, and then decided just the balance in my life again wasn't quite what I wanted it to be. But along that way, I came into meeting Heather, and that's how I ended up as an instructor at the University of Idaho. And um, yeah, this all to say, sort of a lot of this wasn't intentional. Um, as it sort of zoomed out as a big picture. Um, but what was very intentional along the way was seizing opportunities that presented themselves. So what do I enjoy about Fuels and Fire? So um, a lot. So early on, the thing that I really loved about Fuels and Fire was like the action of it all, right? And flying around in helicopters and rappelling out of helicopters and getting to go to Alaska and being up in the middle of the night uh, watching things that most people never see and doing it with your best friends. Um, and that quickly, or not quickly, I mean, that was great. Um, and still some of my best memories, but professionally you sort of grow into a place where you're really starting to be interested in the science of it or the ecology of it. And that's where I landed. And that's the thing that was interesting to me, right? Was trying to figure out um, what we could do to help prevent some of the most catastrophic things I had seen when I was suppressing fire, in terms of you know uh, places getting burned up, homes getting burned up. And yeah, um, I liked you know to go back and revisit some of the stuff I was talking about before, um, thinking about how systems could be put in place, before the event, before wildland fire, to either prevent a catastrophic outcome, or at least make it easier for the folks who have to go fight that fire to get around it. What are the challenges? Um, there are a lot of them, I think, I think there are a lot. It's a super, um, wildland fire and fuels, um, is just so dynamic. And working in that environment, you know, just for you is very demanding. Working in that environment with people that you know is very challenging. Working in that environment with people you don't know is very challenging. And so um, I think just all around there are a lot of challenges. I think it's a profession that attracts people who really enjoys solving challenges, um, for that reason. So some of the things that I loved about it most, the lifestyle, um, was also one of the most challenging things when you're doing this full time, especially if you're more on the fire side than the fuel side. Back when there was a little bit more separation, it's a lot of all the same thing nowadays. Um, uh, but it's very demanding. It pulls you out of normal life, as you sort of know it, and puts you in a really intense environment, for better or worse, for half the year or more. And that can be really challenging, emotionally, mentally, physically. The human dynamics of it, again, it's a lot of people who, humans are human. And the human dynamic of it all, um, can be a challenge, working with all different types of people. There's system constraints, right? There's things you're allowed to do. There's things you're not allowed to do. Um, and you have to figure out how to uh, get to an outcome that's desired by either the public or the land management agency or your supervisor or whomever. Um, and there's a system in place that is there to either keep you safe or because there are laws. And you have to work within the constraints of that system to achieve the goal, and that can be a challenge. Public opinion, generally firefighters are supported, but how we use fire in the land, there's a lot of different opinions about it, and just a lot of generally not a lot of awareness or understanding about what we're doing. Funding, especially with federal agencies, goes up and goes down. And when you get into the side where you're planning um, prescribed burns or fuels treatments, or just sort of planning at a higher level, the funding piece really can be a challenge to overcome. And then another thing I found challenging, at a certain point, when I wasn't a single person anymore, I had a family. In order to advance my career, it required me to be away from home a lot. It required overtime to work on qualifications. And that was something that, yeah, I found that to be challenging. So knowledge, skills, and attitudes for success in fire and fuels. Knowledge, um, I would say, um, a lot of this you don't necessarily have to go in knowing, but as you go along, knowing this stuff really will allow you to make better decisions, keep people safe, and then build your career. And so, understanding weather and geography, ecology, biology, all of these systems that are in play with each other out there, you can be much better at your job if you have just a basic understanding of what is going on. You can anticipate what might happen a lot better. And then it's just a very demanding job, on people. So understanding, basic nutrition or physiology, and then just having a really good understanding of yourself, um, can be really key, to being successful out there, and understanding, what your limits are. Um, I think when I was young and I got into this, I didn't think I had any limits, and I will tell you, I absolutely learned that I did, and that was, it's humbling, but it's also valuable. Um, to know that about you and the people you're doing this with. Um, so skills that'll make you um, successful. And again, these are a little bit tailored for earlier on in your career as you're sort of getting into it. But just learning how to hike with weight um, is a big one. Learning how to take direction, learning how to give direction, how to navigate, how to be a safe driver, how to drive long hours. These are all things that, I don't think people necessarily think of when they think about fuels and fire. But these are just sort of things that are expected to happen in the background. And for you to be proficient at them, and the better you are at them, and the less you have to think about them, the better you can be at the sort of like the other fun stuff. Um, Being able to do more with less. It's a double-edged sword. Sometimes you can get asked to do too much with not enough. Um, and then creating a network, learn how to create a network. I think that's a skill. And I mean a network of people, professionals, and being able to sell yourself. Again, humility is huge. It's I think a virtue, but you have got to be able to stand up for you. Um, you know, the agency is not going to do it. Your boss isn't necessarily going to do it. You really have to learn how to do that for you, and it's a skill to be able to do that the right way. Um, the attitude, um, again, I think maybe this is for an entire career, but especially early on, be the first to volunteer for anything. And I would argue, and someone may disagree that you might hear somebody say specialize, but have the attitude that you're going to diversify, and just learn everything and have experience with everything out there. And I think for me that led to me getting that next job was because I had several skills. Um, and so, that last list, those were things that would um, help you be successful out on the fire line or in fire and fuels. Um, there's a lot of overlap, but there was stuff, that I learned in fire that has served me well in my own personal life. The knowledge, being able to analyze risk um, comes in pretty handy. uh, uh, and then learning how to manage risk in your life. Living outdoors, you learn how to travel well. You learn how to navigate. You learn about weather, ecology, geography, project management. I learned a lot about how to manage projects when I was in fire. Another one, I don't have it listed here, but I no longer wear a watch, but I can tell you probably within 10 or 15 minutes exactly what time it is at all times a day, and I'm not like looking at my iPhone or anything. I mean, it's just like I had to know what time it was for a long time, and that's just sort of like built in now. Skills, you learn leadership, communication, how to build habits. Um, you understand. So one thing that one of the big things I took with me is uh, understanding how to be safe and comfortable. I understood for me what it took to be safe, comfortable, and productive. And that list was very short. And I've tried to do that in my own life where I know what it takes for me to be safe, comfortable, and productive. And it's not a long list of things. It's a short list of things. And so I'm able to be safe, comfortable, and productive more often because it's such a short list, if that concept is coming through. Um, Learn how to learn. I mentioned early on, I struggled in college, but I did not struggle to learn when I was hands-on learning out in the woods. I was very good at it. And And then another skill is compartmentalizing. I really there's a lot of emotion um, when you're participating in events like this, and again in groups of people, and being able to being able to stay present, um, and sort of deal with anxiety or fear or any other thing, any other feeling like that, and sort of compartmentalize it in the moment, and then perhaps deal with it in a time and place when you have the time to do it, is a skill that it, if used the wrong way, can be very fairly destructive, quite honestly. But if used the right way, I think can really help you, um, out on the line, and then take it back to another time when you can deal with something. um, Attitude. So I used to have this squad boss, and anytime we were hiking a hill on like a PT hike, he used to just yell, "Make it flat." And I like that idea. The idea being, it's all in your mind, right? Like you're struggling physically to get up this hill with 50 plus pounds on your back. But if you're thinking, I'm just taking a walk on a flat surface, um, it can help you get to the top. And I try and make, when I have trouble in my own life, I try and make it flat as it can be in my mind. Um, Prevention and intention go a long way, right? So I spent most of my time in like responding to wildfire, in primary fire early on. And the second half of my career was very much about planning, and in prevention, and going out and doing very intentional fuels work. Um, and it just yeah, planning and prevention go a long way. I think in life, though, that concept also is true. Um, I've put out a lot of fires just by looking at them. So I was on a hotshot crew. I left a hotshot crew, went to a fire module, and then went back to a hotshot crew. And I was a squad leader. I would tell my guys, I I put a lot of fires out just by looking at them. And the point is, um, it had be it was at first it was my job to put any and all fires out, no matter what they were burning in, right? And then it was my job for 3 years on a module to just look at fires and understand how they were burning and what they were burning through. And I learned, what they would burn into that would just put them out naturally, right? Or where I could, with the least amount of effort, least amount of effort, because I didn't have a whole crew with me, where I could put them out by myself. Um, and so, um, yeah, again, in my own personal life, sometimes things need a lot of like action. Um, but sometimes, some things just settle themselves, and you just have to take a step back and watch them do it. Um, and then, um, so sometimes the best option in a fire is something that's huge and it's just really rolling. You just got to let it slam the road and then pick up the pieces afterward. And I think that also applies in life. There are some things in life that just have so much energy behind them. You don't want to get out in front of them. That's not safe. You can't really get around them in any traditional sense, but you just let them, uh, come to fruition. You sleep on it, and then the next morning pick up the pieces where you can. Um, and I don't know if those sort of comparisons make any sense to anybody. They do to me. Maybe a stretch, but yeah, I honestly think about these things frequently. I didn't just sort of come up with these for this class. These are things that I think about weekly, as I'm problem solving in my own life. Getting a career. So I think the first thing, and I highlighted this before too, is just take any opportunity that you have. If the opportunity is with a conservation corps, take it. It may lead to something else. If the opportunity is with a crew that's not in your home state, take it. Um, 3 years later, you'll have experience, and then a job on a crew in your home state may open up. But you'll be more positioned to get it if you have those 3 years of experience. Um, there is no substitution for experience. So I think the combination of experience and learning about fire in an academic setting, going through S classes, that is the most powerful combination that you can have for fire and fuels. But the academic side without the experience, I don't think is as powerful. So get out there and experience it. Um, Never underestimate the power of proximity. So several times in my career, it was just being close to the person who was making the decision about the thing that got me an advancement in my career. Um, so yeah, try and uh, you know have a big circle of folks that and a network of folks. And so the other one is like when you're applying for jobs, there's just certain things you have to do in order to even make it onto the hiring list. And just know as you go through your career what that list is and what's on that list. Um, and then I would say if you know this is what you want to do, and for a lot of you folks it is, that's why you're here, right? But if I could go back, I would have gotten um, a degree in any ecology or geography or something more related to fire and fuels. It would have been a lot easier for me to do early on. It's harder as you go on through life. It's also harder just once you become a permanent employee with a federal agency or a state agency to have time for both. It's 100% doable, but my recommendation would be get it done early if you can. And then try not to burn bridges, especially before you cross them. Um, I will say from experience, early on in early on in my career, um, I'll say I'm saying this from a point of I have burned bridges and wish that I hadn't. Right? I'm not going to sit here and say like I've never burned a bridge, and you shouldn't either. This is like don't burn bridges. I have burned them, and my recommendation is it doesn't serve you later on in life, in your career. So um, that's where that's coming from. And then being successful, right? So this whole thing is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Um, that goes for fire season. That goes for a fire career. It's a long game, and find a speed that you can, in a gear that you can work in for the long haul. And then you've got to get part of the way before you can get all the way. And I think in a lot of these videos, we see people who have gotten to a certain point in their career, but they didn't just get there, right? It wasn't like from point A to point Z. There were a lot of steps along the way, and you just got to work through them. Um, and so even if the next step isn't the like where you ultimately want to end up, just understand that you have to get through the next step at least to get where you ultimately want to end up. And so on the other side, I have do what is required to make the list. But on the being successful side, I have do something different to make it to the top of the list, right? So you need to do what's required in order to advance your career, but you also need to do something that makes you stand out from everybody else who did what was required to advance their career. Um, and then, um, I think people who are really highly specialized can excel and really keep climbing the ladder. Or I think people who have really a highly diversified skill sets uh, can also climb the ladder. You know, there may be more opportunity to climb different ladders and kind of hop from one ladder to the next, so to speak, if you have a bunch of different skill sets. And I think that is it for a slideshow.
That's great.
Heather,
Thanks, Andy.
rescue me.
All right. I learned so much. You did such a great job verbalizing a lot of the stuff that's in my head. Um, Clearly you've thought a lot about this. So I appreciate the detail that you put into it and just there's lots of really good nuggets in there for sure.
Absolutely,
Um,
thank you.
so I'm always curious as people prepare these presentations, what this did for you as far as like an opportunity to kind of consolidate. Had you thought about these things or what was that like for you as you generated this presentation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in to prepare for this, I also watched, several of the ones that are on the previously recorded on the website. And um, you know, looking at that, I realized that a lot of those folks at a certain point in my career, 3, 4, 5 years ago, that's where I expected to be at some point in my career. Um, still with a federal agency, and probably in fuels. And um, one thing that I have known this, and it's one of the reasons I sort of transitioned into the job I have now, and sort of the balance I have now, but is um, there are fewer opportunities to do this type of work outside of the federal government than there are, right? I mean, they've got the monopoly, right? And so thinking of ways um, to take what I have learned in a 15-year career, and not let it go to waste, and also just continue to practice it. I will have to perhaps get creative, but I'm like that's exciting to me. Um, it's not like a downer or anything. So I think
Yeah,
that's one thing that kind of came into focus.
yeah.
And then also I didn't even realize it till I was going through this, but just yeah, I mean, being 20 years old, I couldn't even, I'm 41 now. I couldn't even imagine the career that I had. And, um, and I really, uh, I didn't like looking backwards. It's very easy to kind of connect the dots of how it all kind of worked out. But, looking up, it was not obvious, right? I don't know. Or, yeah,
One of my favorite questions to ask students is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they're always like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't care that you don't know. Nobody
yeah.
knows. No one, even just taking our current positions right now, where you and I are individually and thinking forward of where we want to be, there's no way that we can anticipate the number of interactions that we'll have, the opportunities that'll come and go. And but I think that you're on point with a lot of those things, which is like you just take one step at a time, and the next
Hmm.
opportunity and that diversification, and even especially maybe diversification outside of the fire field is really really important.